I'm Ethan, 24, male, and my roommate stole my food for months, so I cooked a special meal. It sounds like a joke, a silly prank, but when you're on a tight budget, and someone systematically empties your fridge and pantry, that's not funny anymore. It's frustrating, disrespectful, and downright infuriating. This wasn't just about a missing yogurt. It was about a repeated, calculated violation of trust that pushed me to my absolute limit. Jake and I had been roommates for about a year. We met through a mutual friend, Maya, and initially, things were pretty chill. We bonded over late-night gaming sessions and a shared love for obscure indie bands. Jake, an aspiring musician, was always a bit chaotic, but I figured it was just part of his artistic personality. He worked part-time retail, and while his hours were erratic, he always seemed to have enough money for his music gear and going out. I, on the other hand, a graphic designer by profession, was more organized, more meticulous with my budget, especially when it came to groceries. Food was a significant chunk of my expenses, and I planned my meals carefully. The food theft started subtly. A missing slice of bread here, a handful of my expensive, artisanal coffee beans there. I'd convinced myself I was just misremembering, that I'd eaten it or put it somewhere else. But then it escalated. My pre-portioned chicken breast would vanish from the fridge, an entire carton of eggs would disappear overnight, and once, a whole batch of my homemade chili, meant for lunches throughout the week, was gone, just gone. I remember one specific instance when I bought a special craft beer, a limited edition I'd been looking forward to all week. I put it in the back of the fridge, eagerly anticipating cracking it open after a long day. I came home, and it was gone. Jake was there, playing his guitar, completely oblivious, or so he pretended. Another time, I had meticulously prepared all the ingredients for a stir-fry, everything chopped and ready for a quick dinner. I came back from a short errand, and half the vegetables were gone, along with most of the chicken. When I asked him, he just shrugged. Oh, did I? Must have thought it was shared. His casual dismissal infuriated me. Maya, our mutual friend, had visited a few times and noticed the sparse state of my side of the fridge, compared to Jake's perpetually empty shelves. Are you sure you're not accidentally eating your own stuff, Ethan? She joked, but I could tell she sensed something was off. I tried to address the issue politely, several times. My first attempt was a passive-aggressive note on the fridge. Please label your food. Food in this fridge is individual unless marked otherwise. Thanks. It vanished within a day, replaced by nothing but the lingering smell of my missing blueberry muffins. My next step was a direct, calm conversation. Hey Jake, I started one evening, trying to keep my voice even. I've noticed a lot of my groceries have been disappearing lately. It's getting a bit expensive for me. So could you please make sure you're not accidentally taking my stuff? Jake's response was a masterclass in deflection. He looked genuinely surprised, almost hurt. Really? Your food? Oh man, that's weird. Are you sure you're not just, like, eating it and forgetting? Or maybe it's going bad and you're throwing it out. He even suggested, with a straight face, that maybe one of my friends had come over when I wasn't around and helped themselves. The audacity was astounding. He completely denied any involvement, turning the tables on me, making me feel like I was imagining things or being overly sensitive. I tried leaving specific items out, clearly marked with my name. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, they'd still disappear. I bought a small, cheap webcam and set it up discreetly in the kitchen, hoping to catch him in the act. The footage confirmed my suspicions. Jake, late at night, casually raiding my section of the fridge, sometimes even bringing a plate to scoop up my leftovers. My heart sank watching it. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. The realization that he was not only stealing my food but actively lying and gaslighting me about it was a fresh sting. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the disrespect, the constant feeling of being taken advantage of, and the blatant disregard for our shared living space. I stopped trying to talk to him. The polite conversations, the notes, the subtle hints, they were all useless. Jake was determined to live in a reality where my food magically disappeared, and he was the innocent, starving artist. My patience was wearing thin, replaced by a simmering resentment and a growing desire for him to finally, unequivocally, understand the consequences of his actions. The emotional and financial toll of Jake's constant food theft started to weigh heavily on me. I was on a strict budget, and having to constantly replace expensive ingredients or full meals meant I was either skipping meals myself, cutting back on other necessities, or dipping into my meager savings. It wasn't just frustrating, it was genuinely impacting my well-being. I'd come home exhausted from work, looking forward to a quick dinner I'd planned, only to find the key ingredient missing. The anger would bubble up, mixed with a deep sense of powerlessness. I found myself meticulously guarding my groceries, hiding items in obscure corners of the fridge, and even briefly considering a mini fridge in my room. But the thought of being driven to such lengths in my own home felt ridiculous and unfair. The joy of cooking, something I genuinely loved, diminished. Why bother preparing something delicious if it was just going to disappear? The final straw came after I bought a fresh salmon fillet. A rare treat I'd saved up for. I planned to make it for dinner that night. A small celebration after finishing a particularly grueling design project. I got home, excited, only to find the salmon gone. No note, no apology. Just an empty space in the fridge. Jake was in the living room, munching loudly on something that smelled suspiciously like cooked fish, my stomach clenched with a mix of hunger and pure rage. I confronted him, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. Jake, where's the salmon I bought? He looked up, a piece of fish in his mouth, completely unfazed. Oh, that, yeah, I cooked it. Thought you weren't going to use it tonight. It was pretty good. Actually, that was it. The casual admission, the unapologetic tone. The sheer audacity of him eating my expensive treat while I stood there, tired and hungry. It wasn't just about the salmon, it was the culmination of months of disrespect, of lies, of being taken for a fool. In that moment, the frustration crystallized into a cold, clear determination. I wasn't going to let this slide anymore. I wasn't going to have another pointless conversation or leave another ignored note. It was time for a different approach, a special meal, indeed. The idea for the special meal began to form almost immediately after the salmon incident. It wasn't about causing him harm, it was about delivering a message, a taste of his own medicine. In a way he couldn't deny or deflect, the goal was to create something so unappetizing, so uniquely unpleasant, that he would be forced to acknowledge he had eaten my food and that it was a terrible experience. My graphic designer brain, usually focused on aesthetics and user experience, now shifted to culinary disruption. I started researching harmless but potent ingredients that could create a truly revolting meal. My criteria were simple, non-toxic, absolutely no ingredients that could cause any lasting harm. This was about a lesson, not a hospital visit. Visually deceptive, it had to look appealing enough for Jake to take a bite, maybe even a few bites. Taste, texture nightmare, the actual eating experience had to be deeply unpleasant, undeniably mine. The meal had to be something so specific and unusual that he couldn't pretend it was leftovers from a shared meal or something he mistook for his own. After a few days of brainstorming and discreet online research, I settled on a plan. The base would be a simple pasta dish, something common enough that it wouldn't immediately raise suspicion. But the special ingredients would be the key. I planned to combine an excessive amount of bitter melon, a vegetable known for its intense bitterness, often used in Asian cuisine, but very specific in flavor. A generous amount of pureed black olives for an overpowering salty and briny flavor, and an unappealing dark color, and for texture, gelatin mixed with a tiny amount of baking soda to give it a slightly rubbery, oddly fizzy mouthfeel. The final touch would be a few drops of blue food coloring, just enough to give the sauce an unsettling, unnatural hue, making it look sickly despite the initial appearance of something edible. I made a discreet trip to a specialized international grocery store to get the bitter melon and a particularly pungent brand of black olives. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction as I purchased the ingredients, knowing I was preparing a trap that was both clever and poetic. This wasn't about rage anymore, it was about precision, a carefully crafted lesson in consequences. The day of the special meal arrived. Jake was out for most of the afternoon, giving me ample time to execute my plan. I waited until I knew he wouldn't be back for a few hours, then I set to work. First, I boiled the pasta, a generic pen. Nothing too distinctive. While it cooked, I prepared the sauce. I carefully diced and sautéed the bitter melon, ensuring it retained its distinct, potent flavor without completely disintegrating. Then, I added the pureed black olives, watching as the mixture turned a murky, unappetizing dark green. The smell was already intense, a strong, briny aroma that made my nose wrinkle. Next came the thickener. I dissolved a packet of unflavored gelatin in a small amount of warm water, then stirred in just a pinch of baking soda. This mixture, once added to the hot sauce, would create the desired rubbery texture and slight fizziness, an unsettling combination for any palate. As the sauce simmered, I added a few drops of blue food coloring. The sauce transformed into a truly grotesque, mottled blue-green hue, reminiscent of something you'd find at the bottom of a stagnant pond. It looked visually alarming, yet not so much that a hungry, unsuspecting roommate wouldn't take a chance. Finally, I tossed the cooked pasta with the sauce, ensuring every piece was thoroughly coated in the repulsive mixture. The smell was now a bizarre blend of bitter, briny, and faintly metallic. I spooned a generous portion into one of my personal, identifiable Tupperware containers, the kind he always took without asking, and left it prominently in the front of the fridge, nestled amongst his usual empty condiment bottles. I even wrote lunch, do not touch, on a sticky note and slapped it on top, knowing full well he would ignore it. I then made myself a separate, normal dinner, carefully cleaning every trace of my special preparation. I felt a mix of anticipation and nerves. This was it, the moment of truth. All I had to do now was wait for Jake to come home and fall into my delicious, terrible trap. I was in my room, pretending to work on a design project, but secretly listening intently. The apartment was quiet for a while, then I heard the familiar sound of Jake's keys in the lock, footsteps, the clatter of his backpack hitting the floor, and then the telltale creak of the refrigerator door, a moment of silence. He was probably assessing the contents, looking for something quick and easy. Then I heard a distinct "What's this?" His voice sounded curious, perhaps a little excited at the prospect of a free meal. I could almost picture him spotting my labeled container, a flicker of that familiar disregard crossing his face as he dismissed my "do not touch" warning. Next, the sounds of him opening the container, the clink of a fork, and then the unmistakable sound of him taking a bite. A moment of chewing. Then a sudden, explosive cough. Ugh, what in the world? I heard rapid footsteps, then the sound of the sink running, vigorously, splashing, more coughing, and then a retching sound, not full-on vomiting, but definitely a strong, disgusted gag reflex. He was clearly trying to rinse his mouth out. I waited a few more moments, giving him time to fully process the horror of what he had just consumed. Then I casually emerged from my room, feigning ignorance. "Hey, Jake, what's all the commotion? Everything okay?" He spun around, his face a ghastly shade of green, his eyes wide and watering. "Ethan, what was that? That blue stuff in the fridge. It tastes like poison." I almost threw up. I feigned surprise, walking towards the fridge. "Blue stuff? Oh, you mean my special pasta, the one I clearly labeled lunch. Do not touch." I opened the fridge and pointed to the empty space where my container had been. "It seems to be gone now. Funny that." His mouth hung open, a mixture of disgust, shock, and dawning realization on his face. He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. He couldn't deny he had eaten it, and he couldn't pretend it was his own food. The trap had sprung. The air in the kitchen was thick with the stench of bitter olives and my peculiar sauce. Jake, still looking incredibly unwell, finally broke. Okay, fine. I ate your food. I ate the salmon. I ate the chili. I ate the eggs. Everything. I didn't have much money. And it was always just there, and you have so much." And his voice trailed off, his excuses sounding hollow even to him. I let him flounder for a moment, letting the full weight of his confession hang in the air. "So, you were taking my food, Jake. All those times I asked, all those times you denied it. You were just lying to my face." He nodded, shame coloring his pale cheeks. "Yeah, I guess. I'm sorry, Ethan. That blue pasta that was rough. Man, it was meant to be," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Just like it's been rough for me to constantly replace food that you just take without asking or caring. This isn't about the money anymore, Jake. It's about respect. It's about trust, and you've broken both." The confrontation, while unpleasant, was necessary. It was the first time in months that he had admitted his actions. The first time he had truly faced the consequences. There was no more deflection, no more gaslighting. The special meal had forced him into an undeniable corner. The resolution was immediate and clear. I told him that our living situation was no longer sustainable. He had to either start paying for his share of groceries and genuinely respecting my property, or he had to find a new place. I gave him a week to decide. The atmosphere in the apartment remained tense for those 7 days. But remarkably, no more food went missing. Jake eventually admitted that he had been struggling financially for longer than he let on. But his pride kept him from asking for help, leading him to simply take my food. He found a new place to stay with other musician friends, promising to be more open about his struggles in the future. I felt a sense of vindication, a quiet satisfaction that I had finally, creatively, gotten through to him. My kitchen was once again my sanctuary, my food safe. The special meal had been a success, not just in its vile taste, but in its ability to finally bring the truth to light and end a toxic dynamic. It proved that sometimes the most effective way to solve a conflict isn't through anger, but through a perfectly cooked, unforgettable lesson. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time. And don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.